With Jiang's policies, China is restoring its rightful place in the world, with the prestige of old, but as a republic rather than an empire. China can now truly call itself a great republic, a modern nation of hundreds of millions of people and vast territories, the size of an empire, but with institutions to fit the modern age.
就是要建设我们一个民有、民治、民享的新的中国。
So, now that we have the Great Republic, we can do diplomatic things. Now, the first up is declare our diplomatic ambitions, which is the Foreign Office of the Republic of China announced today that the National Honor Reclamation Directive is now in effect, citing decades of humiliation brought upon China by foreign powers and petty acts of imperialism. There was a fiery speech today in the UN calling for an end to oppression and corruption of Asians by the decadent West. So this is the new sort of Pan-Asianism under China. And other than that, well, you have another few interesting things to do if my game doesn't crash. So there is the liberation of Macau and Hong Kong, which are going to incite nationalist rebellions in the two colonies. We're going to start with Macau. There are the invasions in Korea, Burma, Tibet, and Laos and Mongolia. So all of our neighbors. Mongolia right now is under the rule of the Russian Republic, though. So that's gonna take a while. And then the establishment of the Nanjing Pact. Now I'm of course going to secure Tibet first and establish the Nanjing Pact because this establishes the faction. And having our own faction on the map is always nice, of course. So, in the ancient city of Nanjing, several political leaders came together with the Chinese president to discuss the establishment of the Nanjing Pact. The NP would, according to Chinese official, be a wall in the face of destructive communism and Western imperialism throughout the entire globe. So as more and more of the world relegates itself into different factions and alliances, it seems as though the Kuomintang wants to throw in its own hat onto the stage of global politics. Whether or not the pact will succeed in its mission is yet to be seen, so obviously we must expand our fight. This is great because not only we have the pact with India, which gives us the guarantee that if someone attacks us, the Indians are going to stand with us in Pan-Asian solidarity, we also can invite a couple of nations, namely Cambodia and Thailand, to the Nanjing Pact, thus expanding Chinese influence in Southeast Asia. It's unfortunate that the Republic of Indonesia, being a Marxist-Leninist, is not a candidate, and Malaysia, being in the Toronto Accord, is also not a candidate. Of course, the Philippines are in the sphere of influence of the United States, so that's way outside the potential Nanjing Pact accession, which is kind of sad. So obviously we get the Sino-Portuguese agreement. So intimidated by our sponsored thugs and revolutionaries, the Portuguese government gave Macau the authority to negotiate an agreement between China and Portugal. As a gesture of kindness, we have offered the Portuguese great leniency in Macau, allowing their businesses and assets to safely flow out of the city. So this is something it is kind of similar to what happened in, I believe, 1968, but generally in the late 60s, with the PRC in Macau. Now, Macau wasn't officially returned to China until the 90s. So here we have the Sino-Portuguese agreement, and the city is ours once more. But in real life, it stayed by it I mean Macau, stayed under Portuguese sovereignty, at least legally, for a long time. After the 60s, when there were a lot of pro-CCP stirrings in Macau, essentially, just like in Hong Kong with the Hong Kong riots of the time. But while in Hong Kong the government was able to hold on, in Macau it was essentially clear to everybody that, just like with Goa in India, the sort of fascist Portuguese government under Salazar couldn't keep control of, this distant colony. And what happens is there is an agreement that essentially basically makes Macau a part of Portugal only by the good graces of the CCP. So basically stating that if we want, we can walk in and take the whole lot at any point. So that kind of keeps the Portuguese problem at bay. With Hong Kong, it's a bit different, and now we're gonna liberate Hong Kong. It was also a bit different in real life, of course, we all know. Well, we all know very vaguely the vague process of returning Hong Kong to mainland China. Anyway, we have a bit of a problem. We have British defiance. So while our revolution in Hong Kong is growing, the British stood defiant against our intimidation, unwilling to surrender the city back to its rightful owner. So our troops are ready. Our general staff calculated that it would only take hours for us to completely overrun Hong Kong, and it is expected that the international community would react coldly to the British. So we are, of course, going to send in the troops, which is going to start a border conflict between Guangdong and Hong Kong, thus not calling in the whole world against us, but we can walk in and take it. Actually, not that easy. Like, I had to get a couple of tries to get this sort of border war to work, but there we go. While many were celebrating on the streets, many capitalists and professionals feared for the worst, attempting to evacuate with the defeated British, presumably to Singapore, which is still a British ally. I just noticed that Singapore is a part of Malaysia in this timeline. Okay. Regardless, Hong Kong's fate has been sealed. They are now reunited with China under a common banner. So that's the hostile takeover of Hong Kong. Great. Absolutely. Excellent. So revolutionaries were equipped with weapons sponsored by an unknown source, presumably China, steadfast in their support for Hong Kong reunification with the mainland. Shortly after the colonial government's order of suppression, China used this as an opportunity to invade, using the excuse to protect Chinese nationals, of course. The British forces were overwhelmed and retreated to Hong Kong Island, abandoning the new territories in Kowloon, which are the sort of mainland Hong Kong. Meanwhile, all diplomatic protests from Britain fell on deaf ears. With no chance of victory, London negotiated a deal, handing Hong Kong over with less losses. So we have reunification with the glorious Hong Kong, which is 100% a part of China now. Now, in real life, interestingly enough, actually, this means no Hong Kong SAR. Now, in real life, interestingly enough, basically the CCP deliberately didn't do something like this because they liked to have Hong Kong as a sort of contact with the outside world, quote unquote, because China was diplomatically isolated throughout the 70s and 80s. While later in the 90s, when we have the sort of reforms and opening going in full swing after Tiananmen, you have that having a negotiated access to Hong Kong as a part of China becomes quite important for the CCP to sort of maintain its opening to the outside world, as was the process that was sort of going on at the time. So Tibet is now obviously back to glorious Chinese rule, as it always was. This was just a mistake in the game, by the way. It clearly was just a mistake in the game. There was never any Tibet, any independent Tibet. It was just like not there, really. And if this doesn't get fixed super soon, well, let's say we might have to censor the game. Anyway, that aside, now we get to finish the Korea, Burma, Laos campaigns. Now, I kind of wanted to do like everything at once, just to provide a little bit of a challenge, but it turns out I don't have enough political power, so I'll go for Burma and Laos first. All right, let's see what these Southeast Asians have to offer. I doubt that they're going to be that strong, but oh well. I don't want to call in Vietnam, because if I call in the Vietnamese Republic, then Laos is going to be way too easy to defeat. But yeah, that's the thing with Hearts of Iron 4. Sometimes you gotta get some extra challenge in on yourself. And yeah, I sincerely doubt that Burma will be able to put up too much of a resistance. They don't seem to have really that strong of a military. There goes Burma. Can we actually even release Burma in any way? Doesn't really seem like it. Well, guess it's ours. Oh no, there we go. So, the fate of Burma. The Shan Union. So, that releases the Union of Burma. Divide Burma into two with the Shan Union being released. Now, I would have liked a third option of, like, just take part of it and release the rest. Let's see how this looks like. Oh, looks like it's a bit, you saw how great China is, and you came to the realization that the light is with China. Or, I don't know, retarded. I'm just being stupid. Oh wait, ask for a control okay, sure. Thankfully I have something called the toolbox, which is always great. There we go, more like something like that. Now, there is actually some... I don't even remember if there was like a border treaty ever signed between PRC and Burma. I think so, maybe in the like 80s and 90s, but like there are like historically lots of border disputes between Burma and China, mainly due to the legacy of essentially British colonial Burma. And more deeply, with this is something that's rooted in, well, thousands of years of essentially conflict between Burma and China, and of course that instantly capitulates the Shan Union. Because, yeah. So yeah, in general, this is like not a very well-defined border. In fact, the Yunnan warlords were very, very clearly not happy with how the border looked, and there were constant border skirmishes between the Yunnan warlords during the warlord era and British Burma, essentially. Which mainly had to deal with like the tribal areas of High Burma, you know, border regions between Burma and China are basically inhabited by a bunch of like mountain peoples that are sort of generally semi-autonomous. In fact, the modern Burmese state doesn't really control much of Burma at all. And during the colonial period, this region sort of more than being controlled by the governments in Rangoon, and in the case of the Chinese side, Kunming, because it was the Yunnan clique that governed this area. It more than like being directly controlled by them, it was more like vague allegiance being paid to one side or the other. So yeah, that's basically the whole ordeal with Burma and China. Being very weird. In fact, even today, I'm pretty sure the Chinese state, that the PRC does have like its hands in the weirdness that is the sort of ethnic conflict and all the unrecognized states that are that have popped up throughout the decades in the region. You should go look at like ethnic conflict in Burma on Wikipedia. There's just like a massive list of liberation armies and undeclared republics and all the good stuff, essentially, to look at. And in fact, even in the post-Civil War period, in our timeline, essentially when the nationalists have been driven out of essentially when the nationalists have been driven out of the rest of China, what happened was that the last nationalist sort of holdouts were, well, Chongqing, Sichuan, Yunnan, and sort of the extreme south, Hainan especially. So that's where, and of course a lot of the coastal cities like Shanghai and Ningbo. So that's where the Taiwan escapes comes from, the troops that were sort of pinned against the coast cities. While there was another contingent, which is actually where Chiang was, which was in Sichuan and Yunnan, and they escaped to Burma. In fact, there was this nationalist army that was active mainly in drug smuggling, but also in guerrilla. Wait, you just deployed like 7 million troops. That was active, again, mainly in drug smuggling, but also in the ethnic conflicts of the region, but also in a bit of guerrilla anti-CCP attacks in northern Burma for a lot of years. The Chiang's secret army was known as. So there is a very, very complex history between not only China in general, but also nationalist China and Burma, Republican China as a whole. And I'm sure that we haven't seen all of it, because Burma's still a powder keg today, and China's one of the only countries in the world that really, like, is able to deal with them without really much scruple or problems. And I mean, this with the central government. But, you know, yeah. All right. So it looks like the Lao People's Democratic Republic is still holding on. Oh, I have a lot of political power. Why can I not? Oh, at peace. God damn it. So I need to resolve the Laos shit before I can invade Korea, which is a problem, but whatever. It's going to be successful. And this is going to be a bloody affair because of the jungles, of course. And in fact, the Lao People's Democratic Republic has a shitload of troops. Up to 100,000. That is almost as many as we have. We have 400k. Our army still needs to be massively expanded, of course. But we're just gonna drive down to Phuc Thai after taking Vientiane, and that's gonna be the end of the Lao Democratic Republic, of course. No one can stand against the glorious China. And there they go. So with that, Southeast Asia is mostly secured, and now we can deal with the fallout. AKA, we're gonna invite Cambodia and Thailand in, and of course they accept. Laos. Sure, we're just gonna install a loyal Laos. Of course, we're gonna do a bit of divide and conquer because we don't want the Vietnamese Republic to have everything. Although it would be, I think it would be nice to have an option to integrate it with the Vietnamese Republic, but whatever. And I'm not exactly too fond of it being a kingdom of Laos, mostly just because, like, aesthetics. Like, I like these Southeast Asian puppet states to look a lot like KMT nationalist China, because if you look at the Vietnamese Republic flag and the Burmese flag, they're the same as nationalist China. I like how, like, it feels like these guys are all taking after nationalist China, which, to be fair, isn't really all that different from real life, because this was a real Vietnamese flag. It was the flag of the Vietnamese nationalists, although they never took power, really. And something like this is the real flag of Burma. I'm pretty sure it's not exactly this flag, which looks like it's got 6 stars, maybe to represent, like, the ethnic groups, probably. But it's basically on the real Burmese flag. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, but it's basically pretty similar to the nationalist Chinese flag. I don't think entirely a coincidence. Anyways, that's gonna be it for now. We're heading into the Nanjing years. Ooh, how great! How great! How excellent! May the glorious reign of the eternal Marshal Chiang Kai-shek never shine upon us. So that's about it. I'm gonna do a bit of economy, and then deal with the evil Koreans, and maybe we're gonna see what Japan gets up to, because Japan has rebuilt a lot of their army. Of course, mostly just probably low tech, but yeah, they don't have a fleet, but they're gonna have an air force. And they are friends of the Koreans. Who knows? We might have to finally deal with the evil that is communism and the evil that is Japan once and for all.